Well, good morning to everyone. I want to just welcome you all to Polk County School Board's work session on this fine day, and I would like to call this meeting to order. It's April 9th, 2024. I'd like to thank again everyone for being here, especially our staff. I see you all gathering in the back area there. I appreciate your availability to us as we can work through some of these issues today on our agenda. We're humbled to serve alongside of you, I would say the most highly educated workforce in the nation. I'd like to start by reading our Who Are We statement. And here we go. We are the Polk County Leadership and Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where stakeholders, they feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. And then collectively, we need to work together on behalf of the children that we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative to that. We will always collaborate in a very respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create this community of lifelong learners. And at this time, Superintendent Hyde, I would like to turn it over to you so you can work through these things in today's work session. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I'll actually turn it over to Mr. Bridges because the first item for today's workshop is we will recess for the attorney-client session. Mr. Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Chair, board members, you'll recall that the school board has been sued, and the style of the case is County Citizens Defending Freedom USA, Inc., Robert Goodman, Aaron Fiore, and Deborah Baublitz, plaintiffs, versus the school board of Polk County, Florida, defendant. And Florida Statute 286.07, or .011, I'm sorry, permits you to meet privately with your counsel to discuss litigation strategy. And I desire your advice in formulating our strategy. We have published the requisite public notice. We'll meet in closed session. There will be a court reporter present who will transcribe the entire proceeding, and the transcript will become public record at the close of the litigation. Present will be the superintendent of schools and his counsel, Chad Davis, the members of the school board, and the attorneys representing the district in this, Jim Valenti and Sam Hensel. I have reserved an hour for this purpose. I do not anticipate it will take that long, but I learned the hard way a long time ago. It is better to request more and take less than vice versa. So we'll meet in private, and I think they've got a set up down in the superintendent's large conference room for that purpose. But the statute requires us to convene in open session, retire to closed session, then return to open session where it will be closed and you can reconvene the work session.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Anything else, Mr. Hyde? No, sir. All right. We will now move to the superintendent's office.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call this meeting back to order on this fine day and turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to help us wrap up, I think, these approximately 6 agenda items for today. Superintendent?
Sir, Mr. Chair, members of the board, at this time I'd like to bring Ricky Wiggs forward, Director for Specialized Student Services. He'll be reviewing for you some changes to 2024-2025 Student Code of Conduct.
I have a lot of changes this year for the Code of Conduct. A lot of the changes last year were because of statute changes. Up to date, we have not received any of the statute changes. This year was a lot of alignment, additions and corrections that we made to the policy. I think you all have a change sheet in your possession, and we can just go through the changes. Or you want me to highlight or go through each one of them item by item?
There aren't very many, Mr. Wiggs, so you might as well just go line by line if you don't mind.
Okay. The first change is Roman numeral 15 to Roman numeral 20. We removed the technology policy. After conferring with Ms. Pasco and we deliberated, we just removed the entire policy from the Code of Conduct, but we do make references to the policy in the code when necessary. Part of that is that if there are policy changes to technology, we won't have to worry about it being incorrect in the Code of Conduct. So we had that change. Page 6, we added the section Access to Technology, Rights and Responsibilities, and that was to align with the district policy. Also, we added have the right to a district-issued one-to-one device. Again, all that is to align with policy, and we noted that they have the right to receive instruction of proper technology use. We added the responsibilities for students is that they must have the responsibility to care for and use appropriately and return it upon withdrawal or request. Students also have the responsibility to participate in required instruction on the proper use of district-issued technology pursuant to Board Policy 754.03, and that is to align with district policy. On page 18, Section 2.18, we added language to reflect the state statute for restroom use. Restroom and changing facilities, the district provides restroom designated for exclusive use by females and males. The district also offers unisex restrooms for its schools. A student may only enter a restroom or changing facility designated as outlined in District Policy 7412. Any student found to be in violation of this policy and who does not comply with remedies suggested by school administration and/or staff or school district officials will be in violation of the Code of Student Conduct and can be disciplined according to Section 5.22 of the same code. And we did that to comply with state statute. State statute says that there has to be some language in the Code of Student Conduct regarding restroom use. We renamed Section 5.09 on page 38, computer misuse, to district-issued device/technology, and that is to align with district policy. Page 38, we added the language, district-issued devices/technology includes, but it's not limited to, any technology checked out to a student and any district-owned technology accessed by the student. Additionally, it includes all digital resources purchased and or pure approved by the district pursuant to board policy 7540.03. Page 38, we added a level to include alternative education programs and expulsion so that we would have that based upon the severity of the violation to technology. We deleted the language in section 5.26, the description access to the business/guest network shall require authentication. Sharing access information is prohibited. The use of personal communication devices must be consistent with the established standards for appropriate use as defined by this policy can be found on page Roman numerals 15 to 18 in this Code of Student Conduct or online. So we removed all of that language to align that it's no longer required, okay, because they can no longer have access, so there was no need for that language. Page 50, if you were to see it, it's highlighted in red. It's highlighted in red not because it was a change, but only to emphasize the statute, that we wanted to make sure the statute was emphasized. And page 53, we remove Appendix B, email and supplemental digital resources opt-out form. That's no longer an option. And those are the major changes, other than just page numbers will change as a issue of removing stuff.
Ms. Miller?
Hey, I have a question. So was there a committee that met to go over these changes? Because I was informed that a community member was just sent the changes, and I don't know if like scheduling happened or something. Usually the committee meets.
Yes, we had a meeting. It was held both virtually and in person.
Okay.
That there were notifications. Some of the things took place after that meeting. That instead of convening everybody, we sent it out because the technology was the major piece.
And how often do you meet every year? Is it once?
Once a year.
Okay.
Whenever we get the changes and we start going into edits, then we'll meet.
If there's on the list, I don't know that it's been updated. I don't see Rebecca Ekman or anyone from the ESE department. Can I just send an email with suggestions to make sure that everyone's included in that committee? Because in the past, I know that it's been important when not in these changes specifically, but when we've made changes based on subset groups.
And I think that's one of the things that we have addressed, even with talking to Ms. Pasco. We may, the actual senior director, or in Ms. Egman's case, it may have gone to Ms. Williams.
Okay.
And in the case with Ms. Pasco, it went to Ms. Pasco. But after meeting with Ms. Pasco, she's given us additional staff members' names. So if there are other names that they feel like they want to make sure who's included in that, we definitely can add them.
Thanks so much.
Yes, ma'am. And will you send me that email? Are you going to send me that email? Yes. Okay.
Ms. Fields?
On page 6, it talks about restroom and changing facilities.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question is, it says that if a student violates this policy and goes to a bathroom that they're not assigned to, there will be discipline. Can you tell me what that discipline looks like?
It'll be coded as insubordination because they'll be instructed to use the appropriate restroom according to the statute. And if they refuse, then it's considered to be insubordination, and they'll be disciplined according to the section for insubordination.
And do you know offhand what that is?
Insubordination, the scale can range from a detention to out-of-school suspension.
Okay. And I would imagine that if this were to occur, depending on the leadership of the school or wherever the child is, that there might be initial warning or something like that rather than immediately disciplining the child for going into the wrong restroom?
Yes, ma'am. The code of conduct, the consequences are listed, that it's given as suggestions in that range. Based upon the severity of the action, the principal or the principal's designee can decide at what place do we need to start. The student also has to understand that whatever level it is that they start at, because it's progressive discipline, they cannot go backwards. It always move forward. So it's always at the discretion of the principal or who's ever administering that discipline to know where to start.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Allen?
Thank you, Superintendent. I was just going to note on page 18, within that change as well, it should read unisex rather than unsex. That would be on page 18 within those changes. Secondly, There's a lot of changes in regards to technology, and just wanted to bring this forward. Mr. Wiggs, this probably wouldn't be for you at this point, but more so to Mr. Bridges and to Superintendent Hyde. There's a lot of discussion around the state in regards to AI policies, and I do know that Neola has a AI policy, and I do think it would be to the betterment of our staff and students to recognize the enhancements of AI technology and the proper usage of that, and not necessarily to approach it more from a punitive standpoint. So to really start to bring some clarity around that, and would be something for us to address. And obviously, we're seeing a lot of technology issues within the code of conduct and some of those changes there, but collectively, I'd like to see us move in that direction. I know there's definitely a lot of other boards around the state that are approaching that topic in general.
Yes, sir, and I think that ball is going to be bouncing for quite some time.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. It would be good for us to be ahead of it and definitely innovative in that side. That's all I have, Superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions or comments, Mr. Wiggs. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Next item is charter school projected enrollment for the 24-25 school year. Ms. Amato, Senior Director for Charter Schools.
So good morning. So as always, every year, we bring you the projected enrollment for the charter schools for the upcoming school year. Just to make it simple and concise, we have 12 schools requesting an increase. 7 of those increases align with their contract. 2 of them are high performing, so statute allows the increase. 2 of them are addition, so it is above and beyond what they have originally asked for. And we do have 1 brand new school opening. We have had 3 schools ask for a decrease. No students will lose their seats, so it is not impacting any person or staff at those sites. And just to give you, this will come to you at the next work session, Lakeland Montessori Schoolhouse and Lakeland Montessori Middle will be consolidating. So Lakeland Montessori is increasing by 40 seats because they are absorbing the 40 from the middle school. No other changes at any of the other charter schools.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I just have a question. Looking at some of those that are decreasing their enrollment, are we concerned that they're decreasing enrollment is there a reason that they're decreasing? I'm looking particularly at one that's in the Lake Wales community when we see the additional number of houses going in over there. Taking less students is slightly concerning. Is there a reason why they're looking to take less students?
I think because they haven't reached that capacity to begin with.
Okay.
They've never reached 475 students.
Okay. So is the rationale that it's more for a budgeting
I think more for
concern?
budgeting.
Okay.
And
Is there a way that we can help them get some of those students? I just look at our communities that we're bursting at the seams in so many places. How can we?
Correct. So the school you're referencing is a conversion charter, so they have a preference for the original zone. And please note, the original zone is back from 2002 when they converted. So we have to be mindful of the growth that's there now is not part of the original zone.
Gotcha. Is that something that when we look at contract negotiations, we could look at that zone and what to make sure
Statute language allows us to look at conversion zones and update them as needed.
that as one board member, that's something I would like for us to explore, especially with some of our Lake Wales schools as we're looking at the growth in Lake Wales, that they're similar to Winter Haven. I think that they're starting to grow love handles a little bit, and making sure that that's captured and that those students are zoned appropriately, not busing to another community if needed. Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
Hi, Ms. Amato. I just have a couple of questions in regards to the reduction. Does this have to be done in a timeline? If they come back, I'm looking at the high school as well, if there is an increase in surrounding area or choice to apply there, do they have to come back to request those additional seats at a certain time frame?
So increase or decrease can only occur one time a year.
Okay.
So this is their shot. And if they want to increase or decrease, they will have to wait until this time next year for the following school year.
Have we seen the enrollment decrease in these schools? Is this a pattern of decrease? Do you know?
No, it is not.
I
Typically.
didn't think so. Okay, yeah, this is the first time I've seen it. That's what was
Yes.
a little, I was just caught off guard with the ask to decrease. We're usually asking to increase, especially for those areas in particular. But thank you for that information.
But I think going back, Ms. Miller, to Ms. Amato's earlier point, the schools that have requested a decrease have not actually hit their projected enrollment to begin with. I don't know how that benefits them, other than when they're advertising to families, they want to make sure they're advertising the appropriate number of vacant seats they have. But if you look at each one of those, for example, the high school, you know, their actual PTM for 23-24, they could have had 925, but they only had 781. So there's a huge difference between what they have said their capacity to be, and actually what their actual enrollment is. So I think they're trying to right size a bit to prevent them from having expenses associated with taking on additional students. Unlike our schools, we always find a way to accommodate to the greatest extent possible, you know, with concurrency and adjacency. But an additional 10 or 15 students essentially triggers another instructional unit. They may not have that capacity. If they exceed class size, they exceed some other issues, they could incur costs that they're not going to recoup through FTE. So I think you're seeing them start to right size a bit, but that's my guess.
I have one other question. Thank you. That was a good explanation. We have at least one school on here that we have been greatly concerned about their finances, and with them increasing student or requesting an increase, is that something that your office follows to make sure budgetary wise that they will be successful with increasing students or capacity for students?
Yes, so depending on the school, high-performing schools submit financials to us quarterly. They are reviewed. Non-high-performing charter schools submit them monthly, so we do monitor and track their finances within the best of what they provide us.
I just think as a steward of the tax dollars, I want to make sure that we're putting them in the best situation to be financially responsible, and to keep adding seats when you cannot make budget is concerning. Thank you.
And just a reminder, board members, last time we discussed this, I have had ongoing conversations now with the department as it pertains to this specific scenario. We're not alone in this scenario, and the department has expressed at least an interest in furthering the conversation, because if your financial status is jeopardizing the school's ability to continue to perform or to possibly even stay open, that high-performing designation needs to be reevaluated. And so I think there's a willingness to at least have a discussion around that for certain specific types of schools, you know, based off their enrollment, based off certain criterion. But part of this is our ability to be a little bit more directive as it relates to financial stability is hindered as it relates to them adding student population or projected student population by the fact that they're considered a high-performing school. But their cell size is very small, as we discussed previously. The one positive, and I think Ms. Amato has shared this before, is that the school does pay attention to our meetings. They listen, and they have amended their submission this year, eliminating the middle school edition and focusing more on growing their high school grade levels, which is what we had recommended previously. Take your existing population, try and retain them, and create a projected, you know, a continuance of education versus trying to add middle school grade levels right now in a very competitive environment. So just wanted to add that. Dr. Allen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a very similar question that I was going to pose, you know, just reflecting on this and looking at our policy. I know this comes to us every year. So, you know, in our policy, it just notes when these revisions come forward, you know, there should be evidence of parental support, you know, feasibility, and a lot of different things like that, and just making sure that all those things are packaged and noted in a sense, so we can say that yes, they are abiding by our policy when we approve this.
So correct. When it aligns with the contract, we don't ask for additional documentation because the contract has the enrollment already approved and it's an approved contract. If it is a school that is asking for seats above and beyond their contract, we do ask for that additional documentation to ensure that financially they're stable and that they do have the parental and community support.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Amato.
No further questions. Thank you, Ms. Amato. Next item, board members, Inwood Elementary School's rebranding request. We have Principal Camp with us today. And we have Mr. Gary and his team on standby as well.
Good morning. Good morning, I'm Donna Camp, principal at Inwood Elementary. Mr. Roberts is not here today. I know the PowerPoint says Christopher Roberts, but he couldn't be with us today. So Ms. Farron's standing in his place. So we are here to present the new logo and mascot for Inwood Elementary. Just to kind of let you know, I've been at Inwood since 2018, and when I arrived, the current mascot was not in use at the time. It kind of had already faded out. There was not a lot of things around the campus to display, you know, what that mascot was at that time. So we started working on just having conversations around 2021 with Mr. Gary and his team and the school, kind of what could represent Inwood, because that wasn't being used at the time. So we've spent a couple of years working on that. I'm talking with the SAC team. I've even talked with some children here and there to get some insight. That was pretty interesting. But we just want to kind of have something that represents us, and so we've been working on that, and we're presenting that to you today. So I think it's on your screen. So right here we have a new logo and our mascot, Inwood Innovators, and we're using the Impala as the mascot to kind of push that forward, and just to kind of give us our identity of what we believe matches the work that we're putting in, the core beliefs, our morals, values of what we're kind of pushing forward with our K-5 students. And just some information here about the Impala. It's been interesting. Some of the teachers come through and see the Impala and say, well, what is it? So we want you to be able to tell what it is first. But as we've talked about it, it's been well received. And when we look at the Impala, really my first word I think about is resilience. I've been there 5 years, and I think Inwood staff and students have been very resilient. A lot of ups and downs, lots of changes. You know, the door opens and it closes a lot, you know, people coming and going. But I think we've been very resilient. And the Impala really does represent that. Also striving with our school improvement mission and vision of students striving to work for higher achievement and academic success, to always strive to move forward, have their own expectations, high standards, and I think the Impala does represent that. We added the COG as well because we want to raise the expectation for students to always be learning, to always be moving forward. That cog is always in motion, never stagnant, never still, but always finding a way to move forward and to grow, whether you are a student, staff, myself, that we're always growing and that we're always moving as a school and as a community. So that was the reason for the cog, because we want to be innovative. We want to be current as well, and we want to be progressive, even with children. We want them to know that there are opportunities to even be progressive at their age. They're very bright, very smart. They come up with great ideas, and we want to push that forward, and the COG is to represent that for us. Okay. Benefits of adopting this new logo and mascot. Again, it replaces what has not been used, no longer around campus. Creates a modern image. It builds new identity and brand awareness. And it gives us an opportunity to establish things around our campus, logos, markings, all those kinds of things. Some important information. The Impala is unique for us. No other school has this mascot in Polk County. So we're happy about that. It will not require any changes to our campus. It won't require any changes to what we're currently using as T-shirts, what parents will have to purchase. Our original colors will stay the same, the hunter green, the navy blue. Those won't change, so those things will continue to be the same. So it will not incur additional cost to parents. Not mandatory, but over time we're hoping to embed that in what we have now. We currently just have shirts that just say Inwood Elementary, so we think it'll be an easy segue as parents feel comfortable purchasing the new branding. Okay. And you have a copy there. We hope that it does look simple and clean and versatile. So we're looking forward to have polos, T-shirts, mugs, everything that we can possibly have. We're hoping we can have that. But again, it will be a slow transition to anything that's financial. It'll be a slow process to that, whether it's the letterhead, postcards, anything that requires a budget. It will be a slow process segue into that. Okay. And then to show you some of the images here, this is I'm going to go back. The style guide, we're in the style guide now. The font right here, pretty easy. Here are the colors again, the hunter green, the navy blue, the secondary colors, the black and the white. Very simple, calm color. I like very calm colors. And then here's an image of the vertical logo, what that will look vertically. Inwood Elementary with the Impala and the cog, kind of connected, working together there. Continuous moving forward and aiming high. So that's what we see here. The cog is we're moving, we're never stagnant. And then that Impala that we're aiming for great outcomes, we can put it that way, for success. And here it would be in a horizontal format. Again, the same colors. And what it would look like on T-shirts. Some samples there. And other items, agendas, notepads, mugs, pens, etc. And banners, what it would look like on banners as well. I think that's the last one. Thank you.
Ms. White.
Thank you. I love Inwood. It's such a sweet little school.
Thank you. It is.
So one of the questions, and you answered it, and I know it says in here, as far as T-shirts and clothing, Inwood's unique in that you have several large families that go through your school. So oftentimes, and yes, that you have many. That often one of the things we hear from parents is that I'm wearing my T-shirt that my older brother wore 5 years ago. So as far as not making parents buy new, is there going to be a point that we're no longer using anything of the old logo, or will that be, how slow of a transition can that be? I just want to make sure that it's not
Not tomorrow, right?
okay, that it's not tomorrow, and even it's a school that's.
The old logo is not on anything we're currently using.
Okay.
Right now, it's just Inwood Elementary. So the old logo, that's been gone for years.
Okay, so the current T-shirts, if there's one still floating around in 4 or 5 years, that it won't be the end of the world. I guess that's my concern, is that typically, it's, well, my sister's off at middle school now, and so I've inherited her old shirts, so I want to make sure that that's still possible and that we're not requiring.
And donate, and we still use those as well to support families.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fields.
I love the logo.
Thank you.
When I looked at it, I was feeling calm, and you mentioned that in your description. I love your core beliefs, your values, and your vision, and I think it's going to be very important that you and your team remind the students and their families of that every opportunity. And I don't see any obstacles. I'm willing to bet you that you're going to have a lot of new purchases, because I think that when they see the logo and the I love the picture of the antelope.
Thank you.
And I just think it's amazing that you guys have come up with this. So great job to you and your team and to your parents.
One of the parents already said at the SAC meeting, how soon can I get all this? So they're ready for it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Miller.
Hi, thank you for presenting today. And I just want to say that at first, when I saw the cog, I even texted him and said, another cog, because it seems like all of our schools, that's where they go for STEM. But then when you put it around his head, it made it much more unique. And I was like, I love this. I had to go back and look at it a second time. But because at first, we have lots of schools, and you have Code Academy's former principal with you, and she had cog, like everybody's got the cogs, but you've used it very creatively with the animals. So I think that's going to look very unique and different for the kids. I have a question for the students who do have siblings, but maybe they want a new shirt. Do you guys have open donations that the community members can make straight to your school? Do you have a way to facilitate that for students who may if there's T-shirts, whatever is available to purchase.
I think that's a great idea to tag those donations for just that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend the work on this. I would maybe just a small suggestion on it, but I just to obviously express my opinion on this, to maybe have the symbol facing the opposite direction. It's just a minor nuance. Right now, you've got them facing left, the character. And I'm reminded of Caribou Coffee logo, which is one of my favorite coffee blends, and they've gone through some changes with their logo, and the Caribou is actually going to the right, and then they switched to the right, or it was going to the left, and they switched to the right. It's a very minor thing, but in general, I just really love the meaning, the narrative around this presentation, the guide, the brand guide as well, is very, very clean, and is presented well, just the meaning behind it, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you, sir. I respect your opinion, Dr. Allen. However, considering that the logo goes on the left side of the shirt, he needs to point this way because it's into the child. And then I understand what you're saying on the others, where the logo with the words to the right, you could probably switch him around. But on the shirts for the kids, he needs to point exactly, towards the heart. That's what all the logos do. Thank you. My other business. Thank you.
Turns out we have an expert on the bill.
Yep.
There are no further questions or comments. Well, good job. Mr. Gary, I would invite you to come down just for a moment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can I say thank you to Mr. Gary and his team? They've been very patient and very informative with helping me through this process, made it very easy for me. So I really do thank them for the work that they've put in for Inwood.
So I really just wanted Mr. Geary, first of all, I appreciate that we were able to acknowledge him and his team because they do a lot of great work behind the scenes.
Thanks, sir.
And board members, this weekend and all the events that took place, we rely very heavily on Mr. Geary and his team to put out our communications and support our schools. And so I should take an opportunity to acknowledge him for that as well. Part of the concern with this, though, is when we have a new school, logoing follows a standard process. We do not have a policy as it relates to modifying or changing a mascot. And so we will be we've reached out to Neola, they have one, so that will be coming to you in the future, or they're developing one, if I recall correctly. But Mr. Gary, if you would just briefly kind of summarize that so that the board has a good understanding of the fact that we maybe don't have an explicit policy or procedure, but they will see one in the near future.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much. I just wanted to also thank the team that put this together, and that's Nathan and Jordan and Jace Maley. Those are the three individuals who really worked on this, and really appreciate Inwood Elementary and, of course, Mr. Camp for their help and their patience with us, too. It's a great process, and we learned a lot from them, which will help us when it comes to policies and procedures. Mr. Hyde is correct. There is no policy or procedures on the books as of now when it comes to a school wanting to change or modify or rebrand their logo and their mascot. There is nothing there. So obviously, whenever we find out about that, we offer our assistance and our guidance. We try to help through that process, but it is rather unclear. So we will be presenting a policy for you to review, as well as create procedures that are in place that help guide schools through that process, that put in there a chance for community input and just more orderly way to go about this, especially since it can take an awful lot of time, but it needs to be done very deliberately and very thoughtfully. It has a lot of implications over time.
Thank you.
Yes,
I don't
sir.
see any questions. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Board members, the next item up is the proposed rule development. These were board policies, that the board had asked additional questions, sought clarification on. So there's an additional opportunity. These are also several new policies that will come before you again at the next meeting for further discussion and or public hearing. Mr. Davis, Ms. Griffin.
Good morning. Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. Good morning, everyone. So we are bringing back, as Mr. Hyde said, there were a few After our March 19th special work session, we presented all of those policies. There were a few policies that you guys had revisions on, things that you asked for us to add to the policy or take out of the policy. And we made those revisions. Most of them we made like during the meeting. Some we had to go back and actually, make those changes afterwards. So we wanted to bring all of those back just so you can see that, your changes were made in those. So I'm gonna just go through these really quickly. It's these policies listed on the screen now. So 2210 curriculum development. All we did in that one was add the phrase "as aligned" on page 2. So there's a sentence that said the district will implement a system of comprehensive reading instruction as aligned with FDOE requirements. So that was just a simple change that we put in there. 2417 was comprehensive health education. We added a sentence on page 3 that said the board will annually adopt the curriculum materials for the comprehensive health education. And then policy 2522, which is challenges to adoption or use of instructional library or reading list materials. This policy had a significant amount of changes. If you guys remember, we added, those changes were on page 3 and 4. If you're looking at the PDF that was attached to the agenda, you can see that on page 3, we added in there about 50%. So the committee list and these changes were recommended by Mr. Sharpless and agreed upon. There was I don't think we used the word consensus, but whatever, the board was okay with that. So we added in there, so no more than 50% of each of those groups. And then there's a sentence in there that also says that the meetings will commence as scheduled as long as the majority of the committee is there. Because I know there was concern about if people don't show up and then we don't have an equal amount for each group. So we added that language in there. And then on page 4, we added the statutory language that defines sexual conduct. It was already in the policy earlier on, but we added it again to that list of things that the committee looks at when they review the books. And then we added in there also on that same page that the superintendent will advise the board within 5 days. It was already in there about the superintendent advising the board. We added the within 5 days to those two sections on there. Policy 5420 was reporting student progress. And in that one, we just added a statement that report cards will be available in hard copy upon request. In policy 5465, the GED test, there was questions surrounding whether, in it lists that they only have 3 attempts to take it, and that was not based on statute, so we were able to take that out. So you'll see that that's taken out. That language has been struck through. Policy 5780, the change to this policy actually did not come up in our work session. What happened is after the fact, Neola contacted us, let us know there was a technical error in there. In that policy, they referenced policy 8800, when in reality, they should have referenced policy 8810, because that's where it talks about the Pledge of Allegiance. And then in policy 8510, our wellness policy, we just added on page 4, we added language in there, and we really just we changed one word, but it talks about, when it talks about the school nutrition department being the sole provider of food and beverage items in schools, and before it said following the last lunch period. I know there was some confusion on what that meant, and so we just changed following to through the last lunch period. So those were all policies that we brought to you. We went through pretty in-depth in March, but we just made a few changes. I wanted you to take note of those changes so that we can move forward to bring those back for public, or bring those to public hearing. There are 2 additional policies that there were changes requested to be made that we haven't updated yet. So those are policies 2423, academies and small learning communities. And Wes is checking into that. Mr. Bridges, he was looking into, Ms. Miller had a comment about if we could extend that to age 22. It talks about the services being provided K through 12, and we were thinking of our transition students to age 22. So we're working on that language. I'll bring that one back to you at a later date. And then policy 5517.01, which is our bullying and harassment policy. There weren't any changes that the board wanted to see in that, but we didn't have, when we originally brought it to you, there were certain things that staff didn't have a chance to look at. We thought we had all the staff that needed to look at it, but there's some things that we needed to change in that policy, so that'll be coming back to you in 2 weeks on April 23rd. And then that'll take care of all the policies that we brought before you on March 19th. all the rest of them that we didn't just talk about today, you'll see for public hearing on May 14th. Any questions on those?
Ms. Fields?
Maybe I'm missing it here. I'm looking, everything that you just referenced, is it on our computer system?
So all of the policies, yes, ma'am, they were attached to the agenda on board
The
docs.
changes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Is there one that you're not
I'm
seeing?
looking for the 25, 22 changes.
It is there. I can forward it to you, Ms. Fields.
It should be it should be on pages 3 and 4 of that PDF.
But there is nothing specifically outlined by revision for each policy. Are you understanding what I'm asking? Okay, so you read off a lot of the changes and stuff. What I'm asking you, is there a sheet that actually summarized what you just shared with us?
Oh, no, ma'am, there's not. It's just the language change in the policy. There's not a separate document that
Okay.
outlines what I just said. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think for me, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to say to Superintendent Hyde, I'll say it now, I like the way Mr. Wiggs did his, where he showed every revision. So I think, for me, that helped, that's very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's what I was looking for, so thank you.
You're welcome. That's not a problem.
There's a little of that in the attached PowerPoint, but we can definitely work to see how we can capture that with more specificity for you and board members, Ms. Fields. The concern is that, you know, when the changes become very lengthy, how do we accurately capture and depict that? But we can talk through that and figure out a process that makes more sense.
Yes, sir, I understand. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Allen?
Superintendent Hyde. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, because we talked extensively about the changes in regards to the rulemaking process. I just want to make sure that we've got that written, so we're, you know, that's a document that we can then reference in regards to the changes of the rulemaking process. I know it was verbally stated, but just for sake of, it would be nice, Mr. Bridges, to have that in written form.
We would be delighted to provide.
Thank you, Superintendent, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I was just going off of what Ms. Field said, that I do find it very helpful in the spreadsheet format where it can get, this is the policy, this is the line item, this is the change that it is. Just for what it's worth, that format seems to be most helpful, I think, when I'm going through.
And that's where we're bringing back policies that we've already talked to you about, or anytime are you looking for that, like, when we bring revisions to
Personally, I think it's helpful anytime there's revisions, just to have a summary sheet of these are the, you know, even if it's 3 or 4 things, just these are the 3 things that this changes, just so that it's, especially with the ones that are, I know we're combining new policies, that it's not a straight red line.
The executive summary that we send does highlight all the different changes and what statute they come from. But if you're saying you want to see the exact like language, like we're striking this sentence, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding.
No, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the executive summary, but I don't see that in here. You captured some of it in your PowerPoint.
I think the executive summary was sent, Mr. Hyde, is that what you sent to them?
Yes, ma'am, but
But
I
if
was
it
not
wasn't
aware I
attached.
should resend that, so we can talk through a process.
Okay.
We can talk through a process.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. And I think we spent a lot of time on this, and there was a lot of discussion. So I'm just wanting to make sure that what we discussed and what I'm going to be voting on in this month is okay for me. So that's why I'm asking for that. I just want to clarify it.
And to their credit, it is there. I failed to reattach the executive summary.
It's not here today, Ms. Cunningham. That's what I'm talking about when I'm looking at it. I hear Superintendent Hyde, but it's not here today. It might be here someplace else. But the executive summary, as I would like to see it, is not here. But he's already addressed it, so we're good.
But just for staff's sake, the first one says work session policies. That's where it defines them one at a time. Then each one of those is in each separate PDF. down under that where that explains it. That's all I'm saying. They did do that. They didn't put it in one document, but it's all here. One by one. The
I'm
one
not
you
gonna be
asked,
back and forth with
2522, challenges to adoption or use of instructional life. It's the third PDF in line there. So I'm just saying they did attach it.
I'll resend it, and I'll have it attached, so. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. There are no further questions or comments. Thank you.
The remainder of the policies that we're going to go through today, this will be your first time seeing these revisions. So I'll just go through them all, and they all are human resource related policies. So you'll see in there, sometimes there's different groups. So there's like the 1,000 group, which is the administrators, and then the instructional group, 3,000s, and then support in the 4,000s. So you'll see sometimes where it's the same policy, we're going to bring the same language through, walk the same language over multiple times. And then Mr. Warren is here, once I go through them, if you have specific questions about any of the policies. So policy 1120 and 3120, it's employment of administrators and employment of instructional staff. And these policies are revised to incorporate statutory revisions to screening standards, which comes from Senate Bill 2524. And this is for positions that are in direct contact with students. So specifically, the list of disqualifying felony offenses has been replaced with those covered by level 2 background screening. So beginning in January of 2025, employees will be screened by the ACA clearinghouse. And the level 2 background screening will capture all of those felony offenses that we screen for. And then policy 3120 has additional provisions regarding the issuance of a district adjunct teaching certificate and the creation of the Heroes in the Classroom sign-on bonus. Policy 1121.01 is our background screening and employment history checks. And this stems very similar to the previous two policies that we just talked about going through the care provider background screening clearinghouse, but it also requires the districts to use the E-Verify system to verify the work authorization of all newly hired employees. Policy 1122 is our non-discrimination and equal opportunity policy, and the changes that you see in this policy, the identical language will be walked over to policies 3122 and 4122. And it's recommended as a replacement policy to reflect there's multiple state and federal laws. It's been a few years since we updated this policy, so we're bringing in, and in the executive summary that Mr. Hyde will resend to you guys, it breaks it down even further than this, but it basically captures the changes in the law regarding the maintenance of investigative records, the treatment of anti-Semitism, and then the clarification of internal complaint procedures and unlawful discrimination practices. And then policies 1130 and 3130 is the appointment, assignment, transfer, and promotion of administrators and also of instructional staff. Revisions to these policies specify that neither the superintendent nor a board member may appoint or employ a relative to work under their direct supervision. So this went into effect in July 2019, but doesn't apply to employees that were employed or appointed prior to the superintendent or board member being appointed. Standards of ethical conduct, that's policy 1210, 3210, and 4210. And the revisions are based on Florida Rule 6A 10.081. And it expands our list of obligations to the student to include prohibitions related to classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity, discouraging parental notification, Florida statute as it relates to entering restrooms designated for the opposite sex, and also the violation of the use of personal pronouns and titles. And the rule also mandates that teaching certificate holders shall not intentionally provide classroom instruction on sexual orientation or identity to students in grades K through 3. Policy 1213, student supervision and welfare, was revised to clarify that administrators may withhold information about a student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being from a parent if they believe that that disclosure would result in the abuse or abandonment or neglect of a child. But in those cases, they are required to notify DCF. Policy 1216 is dress and grooming, and This one also, the same language we walked over to 3216 and 4216. And this is just an optional revision that provides what's required in the standards for administrator dress and grooming. And it includes being groomed in a way that does not disrupt the educational process or cause a health or safety hazard. Again, that's an optional revision. Policy 1362 is anti-harassment, which will be walked over to 3362 and 4362. And these are based on the 2019 legislative session, House Bill 741. And it just says that boards are now required to treat anti-Semitism identical to any other race-based discrimination or harassment. Policy 1430.03 is our sick leave policy, identical to 3430.03 and 4430.03. And it just is, there's just a simple revision in there to specify how sick leave transferred in from outside of the district will be handled when the employee leaves. So it just says that that it won't be paid out to the employee if the sick leave was transferred in from outside of the district. And then policy 1500 is an optional policy that would also be 3500 and 4500 if you decide to adopt these policies. And this is just a remote work policy. And it came about after the pandemic, just the number of staff that had to work remotely during the pandemic. Neola created language in a policy that just allows us to set some parameters for remote work because in some cases that may have continued, like there may be opportunities for employees to work remotely at different times. So those are just policies that are for your consideration. Policy 3129 is conflict of interest, policy 3129.01, tutoring. Both of those are being revised based on Senate Bill 2524. And it just says that the New World's Reading Scholarship is not a form of remedial tutoring. So that's straight from statute, just that additional language in each of those policies. Almost done. So 3220 is evaluation of instructional personnel, and it's revised to specify that in relation to observations of performance evaluation purposes, that an administrator at a school is not precluded from visiting a classroom to observe teachers for the purposes of providing like mentorship, training, instructional feedback. And that's from House Bill 1537. And then policy 3410 is compensation. It's revised to address how compensation for longevity of service must be handled for instructional personnel. And that's Senate Bill 2524. And then the final policy is would be a new policy for our district. It's the Teacher Bill of Rights, policy 3700, and it's based on Florida Rule 6A 10.081, which we talked about earlier. It expands the list of obligations related to classroom instruction on sexual orientation, identity, bathrooms designated for the opposite sex, titles and pronouns. And this is a new policy, but all of the things contained in this policy our district has already implemented based on staff or memos, legal guidance memos that went out to staff earlier in the school year. So we're already doing all of these things. It's just we're adopting the policy to comply. And I know that was a lot of policies. So if you guys have any specific questions, I am here, Chad is here, and Mr. Warren is here.
Mr. Sharpless.
Sure. So I have two different policies I have questions on. The first, I'm going to talk about 1430.03 sick leave. And there was multiple options there on how we would handle that. And I'm wondering why we chose option 2. What is the reasoning behind that versus option 1 or 3?
Mr. Warren, do you want to speak to the, do you have that one? I have it here.
It's 1430.03 sick leave. Yeah. And number 3 there towards the end of the document, there's 3 options.
Option 2.
Mm-hmm.
Option 2 is considered as we followed up specifically with finance. As the practice is when the sick leave comes over, if the employee leaves or they're not here anymore, That leave came from a previous employer, so it can't be paid out if they're gone, so it would then go back to the employer from which it came. It's a standard practice that's in place currently
So
with option
when
two.
when are we accepting sick leave from other employers is the question then? Is this like a transfer from another district to our district? Is that what we're talking about here?
Correct, there's provision for that. And then upon retirement or death of the employee, I think that's the kicker here, would be the person is leaving permanently, and then somebody else would have to pay out, and/or there's been a death, and so then it would refer back to the agency or the employer from whence the leave came.
And they would be required to pay that.
Yeah, you want to speak to that as well?
Yes, sir. I wanted to add that when leave is transferred from another district, it's 1 day is transferred for each day that's earned. So the leave this is speaking to is the amount that hasn't made it to Polk County yet. So as you earn, you get a day.
I just want to make sure our employees, when they're retiring, are getting everything that we are, that we can give them. So, okay. I have another question, and that'll be my last one. And this is on policy 1216, the dress and grooming. I don't know if this is really a question or a concern. This is an optional policy we talked about, right? So when it says that, that our administrators, which are leaders of our schools, are to be groomed in a way that their hairstyle or dress does not disrupt the educational process or cause a health or safety hazard. That's pretty vague to me. And so I want to make sure that we're not stifling our employees' abilities to, like policing how they're dressed or how they have their hair. I just don't know where, I'm just confused a little bit on why we're enforcing this or putting this policy into place. Is this from an incident or?
So the policy
Is this coming from
itself is not new.
Okay.
The policy itself is not new. That's an optional addition, like revision to the policy, but it's not based on statute.
Neola has brought this to us as a best practice. It was not based in statute, and it is totally optional. If you'd want to just leave the policy alone, that would not be out of compliance.
That's all. That's the only question I had. So,
Ms. Cunningham.
I would say, I'm going to be a little bit vague because of an incident that had occurred. If you have a kid shaves his head and puts a gun on there, there's a lot of craziness out there, and I think this would protect us in that situation. I think you just can't come to school doing crazy stuff with your hair.
This is specific to our administrators, though, our school-based administrators primarily, too. Seems like it speaks more to that.
Okay. Don't know.
So I'll make it simple. In 3 years, I've not had a concern with this. You have an existing policy. I would encourage you to read through the strike-through. If the board is satisfied with the existing policy, you'll have an opportunity to discuss this again at the public hearing, and it can either move forward from there, or we can revise it at that point. Again, I am not aware, Mr. Warren, I'm going to call you back down, or you can just give me a yes or a no from there. To my knowledge, in 3 years that I've been here, I have not dealt with an issue related to this, correct? Okay. So it's just one of those recommendations that comes through, and you can accept or reject it as accordingly. So I think it's fine. Ms. Fields?
I was basically going to say what you said, Superintendent Hyde. If you look at C that's crossed out, it just says dress in a manner that does not cause damage to district property. So that is not very well defined. And I think this statement is supposed to clarify it better.
Ms. Miller?
I just want to add to, it is kind of a vague policy. Being a teacher in a school with leadership that had certain requirements or expectations of what the teachers dress like, it's not the same school to school. I don't know if we're going to get in the weeds of deciding what it needs to be, or if we're going to let the site-based management decide that. So maybe it needs to remain kind of open. We haven't had an issue with this. That's why it wasn't alarming to me that I do like the fact that the changes have been made, because you're not going to harm school property. I'm not sure what you'd wear that would harm school property, but I'm not sure I want to get in the weeds to defining what it needs to be. Thank you.
And I can check with Neola and find out. My guess is because this is a recommendation from them that they recommend to other school districts as well, there may be an incident somewhere that this is addressing, and they just brought that into this policy. But as I said, it is optional. It is not coming from statute or state board rule. If you decide you'd rather leave the policy as is, we would still be in compliance with the law.
Dr. Allen?
I mean, if this conversation's still going, that's fine. I had another issue I wanted to note. But in general, I did have purple hair once, so Mr. Bridges, I don't know if you would accept that for me as board chair to have purple hair one day, but you never know.
I would encourage it, and I will.
Indeed. All right, so the policy I wanted to look at was 1121.01. And this is probably more of a question for superintendent. I know we have policy, but then we also have employment hiring practices. And this is going all the way back to September of last year. And I've got the email up just as a reminder to myself in regards to some statements in this email as far as what you've outlined in regards to future hiring practices. I just want to make sure that I don't know if this policy is a place to put that there, or you would like it to exist more in the practice around that. So I just wanted to make sure that we feel that policy is in alignment with how you see those hiring practices. And again, I can resend that email back to you from September 22nd of last year. But it has to do with background checks and some of those things, and previous arrest and so forth, but on a scenario that took place last year. But I'll resend it just to make sure that.
I can answer it, actually, Dr. Allen. I would, again, I'm going to reiterate that policy is not procedure. Policy establishes the expectation, procedures in the manner in which you provide me as superintendent, or direct me as superintendent to develop the steps in which that's going to be attained. We did make significant modifications to our hiring practices above and beyond what the state requires, because we did have an instance where a failure to prosecute someone when there's a very obvious pattern of behavior, and we're talking 3 or more similar events, accusations, that individual never should have been hired by us. But
and that is the situation.
Our procedure at the time was, unless convicted, they're not necessarily considered in jeopardy of Florida statute. We're simply saying, we're not going to interview you. There's a pattern of behavior there, and we'll address those issues on a case-by-case basis. So we will not. And ever since that time, we've started with our extracurricular staff, we started with our coaches, and we've gone through and rescreened all of their background checks to make sure that even in the absence of a conviction, if something were directly related to one of these felonies that would exclude them from being eligible for employment, that we're at least reviewing those more critically to say, now, with the understanding, if someone were under the influence and got arrested for that 18 years ago, and they've successfully been employed with us, not had a reoccurrence, that's not something we're going to interject ourselves in. However, if there are far more serious issues, and I think the board recognizes which issue we're referring to. If not, I'll be happy to follow up with the board members as it relates to this. But we did modify our practice. So again, policy is policy, procedures, the specific steps that we now follow, and those are well communicated. So.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. There are no further questions or comments. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mr. Hamby is here, or should be here. Or you're doing it, Harry? Mr. Fix is here to talk about the district-wide automation system for portable classrooms. Mr. Fix, I'm going to steal some of your thunder. I'm going to summarize this pretty succinctly. Essentially, what this does is allows us to have better controls over our portables when it comes to HVAC systems, heating and cooling. Prior to that, as you know, we've had multiple issues with thermostats, how to regulate, how do we tell if something's working, how do we tell if something's not, how do we tell if something's being bypassed, intentionally or unintentionally. And so what this does is allows Mr. Fix and his team to work very closely with Ms. Pasco's team so that we can better monitor and control and regulate those devices across our district, especially as we're installing 1,300, 1,500 new devices in preparation for the upcoming heat wave and start of the school year. So, Mr. Fix, I don't know if there's much left for you, sir.
There's not. That's a great summation. The reason we found ourselves where we did in part last summer with the portables is because we have a great energy management system, but that kind of starts going in the opposite direction of comfort and coolness. In our portables, that energy savings was twist the timer and the AC will come on. Well, when it's really hot out in the mornings, you want to get that portable cooled down ahead of time. This will allow us to remotely look at those temperatures and all those portables, bring them up in a time frame such that they'll be cool for those students and our faculty when they come already to school, and be able to turn them all off through our energy management system that we already have in place in many other of our buildings through our three energy managers. So this, I think, will be a tremendous asset for us and help us to not be in a similar situation next year.
And I think the board all realizes that our ability to turn on those devices prior to sunrise to cool those, rather than once the sun's come up and they become hot, it gets very difficult for us to catch up and offset that heat issue. So this allows us better controls, long run.
And this is all made in America, too.
I see no questions or comments, Mr. Fix. Thank you, sir. Board members, the last item we have for you today is budget and staffing as far as my presentation today. So I believe Ms. Jenkins is going to do this presentation or provide this summary for the board.
Good morning again. We are currently revising the salary schedule for the non-union employee group, where all non-union employees will see a 0.5% increase, and that will be retroactive to July 1st. Those in their positions as of January 1st, 2023, we intend to move 2 experience levels, thus affecting about a 2.5% increase. Previously, all non-union salary schedules had 1% between each level, and during the 22-23 fiscal year, when we had to enact the $15 minimum wage, that compressed a couple of our salary schedules, and in an effort to put those back to 1%, that's part of our calculation this year. We plan to bring specific salary schedule documents to you at the next work session so that you can see detail. We just wanted to give you a heads up right now. And we'll have all that, so all employees will be able to see at the April 23rd work session what that means for them. Any
Board
questions?
members, in addition, you may recall that in October, I actually provided you a financial summary and analysis comparing our district against the 6 larger districts based off board request. I also followed up and provided you with a cost analysis as far as salary comparisons for assistant principals, deans, and principals with the 10 neighboring districts. And what you found in there is that we always ranked either last as far as the salary range, average salaries, or we ranked near the second from the bottom. So we have been meeting. ASBA is the group that was already existing. That's our leadership group. They have been meeting with Human Resources. I believe their last meeting was January. They have a meeting coming up either this week or next week or 2 weeks in which they'll discuss this. So that is separate from this. And I need to make sure we clarify that that's not a salary raise, that's a salary adjustment. So their raises are completely separate from that. But again, there's a lot that has to be considered with this. because we also, as you know, we provide insurance coverage for our employees. We also provide and do not require during certain vacation times for the administrators to take leave. So we want to make sure that anything we bring to you establishes a fair and consistent evaluation process so that we're truly comparing apples to apples and not just making assumptions based off published salary schedules. So it is a complicated process and one that will be coming to you before the end of the summer. Okay. Ms. Fields.
Superintendent Howard, I just want to thank you and your team for working on this because there are concerns, and I've shared those with you. And so it's good to know, the public to know, especially our administrators, that we are working on some things for them. So thank you for that. And thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
See no further questions or comments. Mr. Chair, that concludes Superintendent's report, budget, and staffing.
All right, very good. Thank you, Superintendent. Appreciate the staff for being here and your work on these items today. Board members, at this point, we're going to now move down to our board comments. As you're thinking through those, if you have any comments to bring forward today, I did want to note I have received some feedback in regards to our board policy or board manual. And again, I would like to continue that initiative to make sure that that is modified and up to date so we have that working document. So I would say, from a deadline standpoint, it would be nice if you had feedback, if you can have that feedback to Yvette by April 23rd. Would be my preference on the date. And then we'll compile those changes and we'll package the manual with a nice layout and update. And then it'll come before you eventually for approval as well. So I just want to let you know where that is. So if you have feedback based on the examples that I've shared with you and some of the suggested changes from that current document. All right, so I'll move now to your comments. And I'm going to start with Ms. Fields. You're recognized.
Dr. Allen, I had a button pushed.
Oh, yeah, I see you next. Ms. Fields was at it first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Ms. Fields, you're recognized. Oh, okay. All right.
Told me I was first, Dr. Allen.
Oh, weird. I guess maybe she was lingering there from the
okay.
last. All right, Ms. Miller, you're recognized.
I just responded to the submission that you made, but if we still have input regarding maybe new submissions for that book, we just give them to Yvette. Okay, and then we're going to compile that and discuss it as a group. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. All right, board members, anything else from you? If not, I will adjourn this meeting at 11:11 a.m. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.